Let all with eyes to see. ESPN creating a glass ceiling with RPI and strength of schedule to hold the Big 12 down, and they just got caught doing it. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. That's Nick Maravets of Locked On Cyclones co-hosting today as we are going to break down strength of schedule. It is a lie, a fugazi. It is fake, and ESPN is using a glass ceiling to hold Big 12 teams back with both those three letters and RPI. We'll also get into Deion Sanders is back. Is that something that scares other teams in the Big 12, or do we really care? Will they be as competitive without two of their stars? And BYU, Iowa State to meet in the Big 12 title. Nick Maravets seems to think that's the crash course we're headed towards. If you hit subscribe, we both get to keep our jobs. Nick, it has come out that the FPI has a glass ceiling for Big 12 teams, like factor in a really good bowl season. This all from Jeff Fuller. The FPI, the Big 12 can't crack the top 20. And in the strength of schedule, we saw number 44 strength of schedule Notre Dame beat number 1 strength of schedule Georgia. It is all weighted toward the SEC, weighted toward the Big Ten, and it feels like it's becoming more clear that ESPN, the four letters that control the college football playoff, are putting more and more measures in place to hold the Big 12 back.
Well, it's completely ridiculous, too, because I feel like the Big 12 is one of those conferences that's always competing and certainly against each other, obviously, like kind of eating each other up. But these are, in my opinion, one of the best conferences for actual competitive football games. And some of, maybe you don't have the super top end teams like you will have like a Georgia or an Alabama. But I think throughout it's a better conference. So the fact that this is happening is like, why? This is some of the most fun football you're going to find and to pull it from. I mean, I get it if it's the ACC, but really the Big 12?
Yeah, again, Georgia's strength of schedule number 1, Notre Dame 44. But we have so much, and this is really a college football playoff conversation. We have so much around that time, around the selection show that we weigh on strength of schedule. But then again, BYU had 10 wins. I mean, Iowa State had 10 wins this season, finished with 11 after the bowl game, yet they were still ranked below in Alabama. Why? Oh, strength of schedule. But when strength of schedule is determined by an FPI, bear with me here, when strength of schedule is determined by FPI, and according to ESPN's FPI, USC at 7-6 is ranked ahead of any Big 12 school, Arizona State, Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas State included. You're in essence building a formula that's just going to bury the Big 12 conference. And to me, should we count wins? Should we count strength of schedule or FPI? What I want to know, Nick, is what metrics should matter when it comes to the college football playoff, because no one can answer that seemingly.
Well, I think this was the year that really threw it all into the tumbler. I can't tell you anymore. At the beginning of the playoff, I would have said, okay, well, strength of schedule obviously plays a role. When you look at the Indiana game, right, 109th or whatever it was, kind of getting blown out by Notre Dame there early. And then things play out the way that it did. And I was like, maybe does strength of schedule actually matter? I couldn't tell you exactly where we need to go with here, because especially when you look at wins, right? Notre Dame did win it all, but I didn't think before they would have won it all that they had, like, who'd they play? Realistically, can you go off of wins? Does UCF get their national title then when, what was that, 2020, whatever,
17?
won?
I think 2017.
17, yeah. So it was a long time ago. And it was
before you and I were born, actually.
Yeah, actually, realistically, may be the case. But the thing is, all of these metrics are essentially just worthless because college football is completely chaotic at all times. So you pick who is going to get in, and then you go from there. Is it going to be fair? No, because Iowa State never makes it, so it's automatically unfair. But I just don't think there's actually one good metric. And with that being said, that gives ESPN and the playoff committee room to, hey, we want the SEC in. Let's just pick this metric that works well to get them in this situation. They can change the rules. We've seen them do it over and over and over again. And I think that's exactly why, is there is no really good way to know what's the best team right now.
Again, Jeff Fuller makes a great point that the number 1 team in the Big 12's FPI, Arizona State, took the number 1 team in the country to double overtime playing Texas. Again, ESPN's FPI favoring them, though BYU being a number 32 in the FPI before their bowl win is crazy to me. And one of the reasons, Nick, I wanted to loop you into this conversation, have we accepted it? Have Iowa State fans accepted that even when you win 10 games, you're not going to be respected nationally?
Well, I think it's something that kind of we talked about at the Squad Show, and I talked about on Friday. If you're able to go independent, that's a whole different thing. But are you able to go independent is based on your fan base size, essentially, and like how much pull do you have? 10 wins is only worth as much as you're worth to the playoff committee. How much is your rankings worth? So Iowa State getting 10 wins, not the same as an Alabama getting 10 wins, even though they do have higher expectations. I don't think that Iowa State fans are necessarily settling for that we've accepted that fate. I do think that there is an element of this is completely unfair, but also there's a side to this where it's like, hey, we're used to it at this point. We know we have to get to, 11, 12 wins, exceed expectations by far, especially with the way that the Big 12 is ranked. You want to go even deeper. Oh, well, we don't have any quality wins. Well, nobody in the Big 12 is being ranked right now. So we can only play Big 12. It gets deeper and deeper. To answer your question about Iowa State fans, I think they just kind of know, especially with Iowa State's history, it's not something that we're going to be handed. We have to absolutely earn it without a doubt.
Nick, for Iowa State, do you feel as though with a 10-win season this year, you didn't get the flowers you deserve from the national perspective?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's the Iowan in me, but I would say, actually, you're not going to love the answer. I think we got the right amount of flowers. You lose to a Kansas team, and yes, Kansas did kind of wreck everything in the Big 12. And so that's, it's kind of its own thing. But it didn't feel like this team was, yes, we accomplished a lot. We got the 10 wins and we beat Miami. And after we beat Miami, I was like, okay, maybe we're actually, maybe the Big 12 is just really tough. And I watched that Arizona State team live. That team was unbelievable. So us getting blown out by them is a totally different thing, in my opinion. But you just can't drop games to Kansas, especially as an Iowa State team, and expect to be gifted the 12-team playoff. I think it's something that internally everyone is extremely proud of, and obviously hitting the 11-win mark and bringing home the Pop-Tart, amazing trophy and everything. But at some point, you just have to get the job done to move forward. I guess the argument would be we were given essentially 0 flowers, so I think we maybe deserve 5. A cup, give us at least 1 bouquet. But
hydrangea, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Even off the side of the street would have been fine, but no, effectively given none. So if you want to go that route, there wasn't a lot of coverage on it, but at the end of the day, we didn't get the job done, and that's what next year's for.
Well, a ton of production is back for Iowa State. ESPN has them at number 11 next year in the way too early. Top 25, Rocco Beck to Carson Hansen, who just blew up on the scene this year, will lead the way for the Cyclones. I think they will be a very good Big 12 contender next year, possibly the Big 12 champion. We will talk about that later with some way too early predictions of our own. But Deion Sanders is back. Let's hear from someone who's not the horse's mouth. Does this affect Big 12 schools in a negative way? Are they scared of him? This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season is here. That's right. This is a message from Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering, worrying if you are going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress. You can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Nick Maravet's Locked On Cyclones. Deion Sanders is back. He's not going to the Cowboys. He's not going to the Raiders. He's not going to the NFL. He is going to stay at Colorado. He said this across the offseason. Look, I would take interviews too. I get it. I would leverage myself as well. We've heard there have been arguments between him and the athletic director over money disputes, NIL, staff contracts, but the dust has seemingly settled and Deion remains in Boulder. Does that worry you? Do you feel like, Colorado is now the big dog to fend with in the big dog to fend against in 2025?
Well, it doesn't necessarily concern me more because Deion's been there for the last few years. I would say that I think they're better with than without Deion. I think he does a great job of cultivating a culture there and obviously progressing players and developing them into better players. But I would say if I'm more concerned now than I was last year, the answer would be simply no. I don't think that team got better by retaining. I think they avoided getting worse, which is, a good thing, but I don't think that scares me anymore.
Are they a front runner for you? Many people are not talking about Colorado. They're not in a lot of these way too early top 25s. Should they be a front runner for Big 12 champions next season?
I don't see it. No Travis Hunter, no Shedeur, and obviously you lose a ton more. They did bring in the number one quarterback. I believe it was in this year's class. But is he going to see the field right away? I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. I'm sure nobody in Colorado does either. And to that point, I would say, prove it. I want to see it on the field. I want to see it done. As it stands right now, I am not necessarily overly concerned about Colorado. Obviously, we'll talk about in the third segment, who we think will be going to the Big 12 championship game. But I need to see more. And right now it feels like it's still kind of right in that honeymoon phase of when he got there and everything was gleam and glamour. And they got a lot of help from everybody around them. But then you lose to BYU in the, I don't remember what bowl that was at. The
Alamo Bowl. Come on.
Alamo. I wanted to go Alamo, but I didn't want to get it wrong. And so maybe we're starting to see the decline. I don't know, but I am not personally afraid of Colorado at all.
I do think there's a lot of respect there when it comes to having Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter play in that bowl game. Their involvement was massive for the conference, showcasing that bowls still matter to the Big 12. They matter to Deion. They matter to Colorado. The figurehead he is, they tripled up the next most watched team in the Big 12. Their viewership is stunning. Deion Sanders has brought a brand new economy to Boulder. And again, the TV views are piling in. The money is piling in for the conference and for Colorado individually. For an Iowa State, do you like that? Like, I would never consider Ames to be the hub of the paparazzi. Do you like having the belle of the ball being Deion Sanders in Boulder, Colorado in the Big 12?
Before I get to that, I'll say them playing the Stars in the Alamo Bowl, along with obviously Iowa State. No Higgins, never really got a great explanation on that, but Noel, Hansen, Rocco Becht, Miami played obviously Cam Ward through the first half. Not really sure why that went the way that it did, but either way, I do like the transition and the kind of trend towards playing players in bowl games. I'm a huge fan of that, and I do appreciate obviously anyone in the Big 12 kind of going with that, as Iowa State certainly did in the Pop-Tart Bowl. Now, that being said, as far as the market, as far as the money, as far as the attention on the Big 12, that is what I am very appreciative of Deion coming back to Colorado for. You're just not going to get the same amount of eyes if he's not in the Big 12, and that plays into so many different things. Obviously, as you mentioned, the economy that Colorado essentially sparked by bringing him in, but also how much is it worth now if Iowa State beats Colorado? How much would it be worth if Iowa State were to beat Colorado with Joe Schmo coaching, right? They're automatically more eyes on the game. Iowa State gets seen beating Colorado by more people. It's worth more. So to directly affect Iowa State, if you beat Colorado in that instance, it's worth more. And then just what he's doing for the whole conference and as far as eyes and money, it can't be unseen, right? Like, this guy is changing the game. And so definitely a big fan of him sticking around for those reasons.
Is there a concern on the field that not just this next season, but in the future, Deion's status can create a powerhouse in the Big 12, could create a dynasty? Because like you said, they lose a lot. He's got to prove a lot. I'm not saying he won't. There's a massive opportunity for Deion to prove that he can coach without his sons or without Travis Hunter being on his roster. If he's able to prove that, is there a world in which his status, his control of the portal, his control of NIL creates a juggernaut in Colorado? Does that possible scenario worry you?
It's certainly a possible scenario. Actually, I think it's more than plausible if you want to go Mythbusters style. I don't know if it necessarily concerns me yet, just because we have yet to see it. But it is very much on the table. And if one guy's pulling, that leaves the rest of the tray a little bit less full, right? Think of a charcuterie board. There, one guy takes all the Colby Jack, you got to settle for Swiss. I don't love that play. That being said, NIL, the transfer portal, all of that we've seen flatten the playing field. So I don't know how easy it would be for him to build a Nick Saban type dynasty. If anyone could do it, I'd put my trust in Deion. But especially now with the JUCO ruling, which is still going through legislation and whatnot, if that flattens it out even more, I honestly don't know how you can build any sort of dynasty at this time. We'll see, obviously, with NIL going through phases and changes and whatnot, if it could land that way. But if anyone could, it's Deion. As it stands right now, I am under the camp that it's going to be flat. It's pretty level playing field. You can go out and get whoever you need to.
Who do you think next season we could count on being better than Colorado? Are there teams that immediately come to mind? You think, okay, there's no way they would compete. The Buffs would compete with X.
Well, Iowa State, obviously. I mean, why would you have me on if I'm not going to answer that way? BYU up there as well. Arizona State, I'll be very interested to see what they can do without Scadaboo. And for those of you who remember the Big 12 Championship preview, I did learn his name very loud and clear, Scadaboo Dog. Outside of that, I'd love to see maybe Oklahoma State make some noise. There's always one team, right, that's just going to come out of nowhere, like Arizona State. Preview. Nobody had them in the Big 12 Championship. Is saying Oklahoma State going to get me fired? Potentially. It's a ridiculous take, but somebody's going to have to step up. It happens every year, college football being college football. Picking the absolute worst team in the conference seems a little bit basic, but it'd be pretty crazy if it happens.
Yeah, Arizona State proved that, and maybe kind of to what you alluded to, that dynasties are possibly a thing of the past and that the worst team in your conference could elevate itself to win the league, whether it's the Big 12 or a school like South Carolina in the SEC that so many counted out, and then they wanted them in the college football playoff, or Indiana in the Big 10. So many counted them out. Then they're in the college football playoff. It isn't just reserved for the Big 12. Nick, before we move on to a Big 12 championship prediction between BYU and Iowa State, overall, when you see the news that Deion Sanders is returning to Colorado, what emotions does that evoke for a Big 12 fan like yourself?
As a Big 12 fan, definitely hyped. I think it's just really cool the way that he goes, conducts his business. Certainly in the headlines, it gets eyes on the Big 12. As someone who's kind of covering the Cyclones, I think it's a great thing. I think that, as we kind of mentioned, just the amount of eyes that would be on the Cyclones in a game against Colorado is more with Deion there. I definitely would have loved to see him go to the NFL and somehow finagle a way to get both his sons on the same team. So that missing is, that would have been pure cinema. But outside of that, I think there's a lot of upside to him sticking around in Colorado. Hopefully the gold prime shades stick around so I can find my hands on one of those. Those are really cool. I think it's overall a really positive thing, though. And if you want to play the hater card, you can. But look at what he's done. You just can't deny what he's done up until this point. And yes, I've said, gonna have to prove him forward, but what he's done is simply undeniable.
Coming up, who will play in the Big 12 Championship? This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, Saquon Barkley, calling the MVP, Saquon Barkley, or even betting on the coin toss, tails, FanDuel makes it easy to get on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting feature allows you to stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is easy to navigate. Plus, know you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets at the Super Bowl. Yeah, it's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started at $5 bet. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Nick Maravets of Locked On Cyclones. Reading Athlon Sports way too early Big 12 predictions. They have Arizona State at number 1, Kansas State at 2, then BYU at 3, and Iowa State at 4. But it sounds like where you would disagree is taking those first two and flipping them with those 3rd and 4th ranked schools. You have BYU, Iowa State in the Big 12 championship next season. Do you think that's the most likely path we're headed down?
Yeah, I do. And obviously, as the Locked On Cyclones host here, we'll start kind of in that Cyclone territory. Yes, I feel like this has been the most active Iowa State has been in the transfer portal in some time. Maybe I'm mistaken, but just looking at the movement here, we lose quite a few defensive ends. That is the biggest concern that I have for this team. But look at who we're bringing in at wide receiver. Xavier Townsend of UCF and Chase Sowell, I think, maybe won't completely replace Higgins and Knoll. I don't know if you ever could do that. The only pair of receivers go for 1,000 yards in this regular season in the entire country is unbelievable. The fact that it came from Iowa State means so much more. But Sowell and then obviously Townsend being a friend of Rocco, I've talked about multiple times. Did Devontae and Aaron Rodgers make a ton of noise in New York? Unfortunately, no. But look at any game outside of looking at the numbers, their connection is undeniable. So Xavier Townsend coming in as a friend of Rocco is, outside of what he's done at UCF, huge, in my opinion, for chemistry. And we saw, obviously the Noah Pauley interview for San Fran, but he ends up coming back. What can he do with these new wide receivers? Another year with Rocco under his belt. I think offensively, this Iowa State team could be the best we've seen in a while. And then you mentioned the Carson Hansen return. And Iowa State offense is something that we've kind of talked about in the last however long you want to go for back. A struggling point. Now it's going to be the defense, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But offensively, I'm very, very confident in this Iowa State team.
For BYU, and this is from Athlon Sports, Kalani Sitake's team is loaded for another run at the conference title in 2025. Jake Retzlaff being back. LJ Martin being back. One of the better defenses in the Big 12 as well. Fewest points allowed in the conference, 19.6 last season. Harrison Taggart, Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasker. The names go on and on for what BYU will bring back next season. They will be in the top 5 in the Big 12. They should be a number 1, 2, 3 pick preseason in this conference as well. And I believe, to me, this is one of the matchups we did not get in 2024 that could have represented a Big 12 championship. It would have felt like a Big 12 title if Iowa State went on the road and played in Provo, or BYU would have taken on Iowa State in Ames. Is this a big, because, this was the People's Big 12 Championship. That's what Jake Retzlaff said about Colorado and BYU. Is this a recap of what the 2024 title should have been or could have been?
I don't know, honestly. Obviously BYU throttling Colorado was kind of fun to witness, but I don't know if I'd go so far as to say what it should have been. As we talked about previously, you get into conference championships by numbers. So there is no committee deciding it's Iowa State versus Arizona State. And yeah, you can make the argument the best teams. And that's at the end of the day, to me, Iowa State deserved to be in by the numbers. They got in. Did they get blown out? Yes, but they got in because they earned it. That's it. That's all. I'm going to leave it at that, because they didn't necessarily earn it or deserve it with their on the field play. At the end of the day, it looked pretty rough, but numbers wise, they got in when they were supposed to.
There is a major question that most people are asking themselves right now. How could these two play in the Big 12 championship when they already will square off in the regular season? They'll be at Jack Trice. We don't know the date of that game yet. To me, looking at Iowa State's schedule next year, BYU schedule, I should say next year, it plays out favorably enough that I don't think the winner or loser of that game will matter as much down the stretch. We could see an 11-1 Iowa State, an 11-1 BYU, or a 12-0 Iowa State, 11-1 BYU. Flip those around however you want. Is the Big 12 chaotic enough that we could see a regular season rematch in the conference title game?
Absolutely. Obviously, the Big Ten's where people are going to look. Everyone thought it'd be Ohio State, Oregon in that Big 12, that Big Ten championship, but then things go the way they do in the regular season and they shake out differently at the end of the year. Now, the Big 12, I will say this. Iowa State defeats Iowa, maybe a little bit preemptively. I said Iowa State now going to be national champions. We go 7-0. You lose 2 in a row and you find yourself in the middle of ocean. Just no life raft anywhere. You control your own destiny as far as wins and losses week to week, but you need help to make it. Right? You've lost to Texas Tech. You've lost to Kansas. Things are down more than ever. But all of a sudden, things fall your way. You win what you need to, and you find yourself in the house that Jerry built. So I think that right there, it's literally just months ago, is the perfect example of this conference will eat itself alive. Will anyone see it coming? Unlikely. Did anyone take Kansas in that 3-4 week span? Maybe at the end of it. I think last year's a perfect example, though, of You never know. It could be an 2-win Arizona, hypothetically speaking, that just rips up the top and a team that was in the middle of the pack. I mean, we had Baylor almost made the Big 12 championship game. Are you kidding me?
True. The Bears were a game away at the end of the season. Could have done it in the last week, which is stunning within itself. For Iowa State next year, going on the road against Cincinnati and Colorado, those will certainly be tough. At Oklahoma State, who you already said could be a sneaky championship pick. TCU is not a fun road game either. And then a home game against Arizona State or BYU will build a tough schedule. Again, I think BYU is in a fairly favorable spot. It is good ultimately that Iowa State does not play Kansas State in a conference game, so that loss doesn't hurt your college football playoff chances, but you can still land a massive win in the pre-conference, as odd as that is. Baylor and Utah felt that this last season. When you analyze the Iowa State schedule, does it pan out in a way where you see the Cyclones? We know they'll be good, but the schedule panning out in a way where the Cyclones can take advantage.
I see it almost panning out in a way where Iowa State makes a very real run at the 12-team playoff. I mean, that's a good schedule right there. BYU, if they're in this situation, we're laying out where they make the Big 12 title game. Colorado, and I talked about just how much prime matters there. The Arizona State. First off, I'd love to see an Iowa State-Arizona State rivalry born. Look at the basketball game that just happened this weekend. Absolutely electric there, that environment. But that being said, that will depend largely on how does their loss of Cam Scottaboo affect the team. Can't tell you quite yet. And then obviously the win potentially over Kansas State in Ireland would be absolutely legendary. So I think, yes, there is a very realistic path for them to make the Big 12 championship. That's why we're having this conversation. But even more than that, this schedule almost lends itself to you could get in with one loss and come in as, I don't know if I would say outside of a Big 12 championship getting in, maybe as an at-large bid there. But it's very possible. I think this is a very realistic schedule for the Cyclones here.
ESPN has BYU at number 9 in the country, Iowa State at number 11 next season, and they're way too early top 25. If they were to pick a Big 12 championship, it would be these two schools. I don't think anybody would be shocked if the Cougars and the Cyclones square off, two long-tenured coaches, guys who have won at the highest level before, meeting in Arlington. Quite the possibility. Nick Maravets, where can folks find more of your work?
You can find me at Nick Marv on Twitter, and then Locked On Cyclones here on YouTube, baby, every day. Your team every day.
That's pretty easy. When you're not making Locked On Cyclones your first listen every single day, you can make Locked On Big 12 your first listen every day. This has been, and it always will be, Nick, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother.
Locked On. Thanks again for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.